So, Boker Tov, good early afternoon, Netherlands, good evening already, like in Israel, and welcome everybody to this tour. A couple of words, because whenever you get those formal introductions, they never tell you the important stuff about people. So let me tell you the important stuff about me. I have 8 grandchildren. That counts, doesn't it? I'm a scuba diver. That counts too, right? And I also make an amazing chocolate mousse, not sharing the recipe today, but I'm also a foodie. Now you really know me. And now we are getting ready to go on our tour. A couple of words, really two of housekeeping. Diane, my friend from the West Coast, was trying to be helpful and give you my contact information and unfortunately made a couple of mistakes. Let me set it right. My email, if you want to get on my mailing list, is just my last name, korazim@gmail.com. My internet site, not to be confused with my email, is rachelkorazim.com. Rachel Korazim in one word, no space between the Rachel and the Korazim. Okay, that was the only time you're allowed to call me Rachel, just for that. Other than that, okay, here's the, thank you, Ari, for doing that. And now we are ready to go. I'd like to put my PowerPoint on for us to look at. And as I'm getting ready to start, you can see on the screen the title of my tour, of our tour today. I'm sorry, I didn't want to skip that fast. And you can see collective and individual memory with Rachel Korazim. And you can see on the bottom that this tour was planned and prepared with Ezra Corman. So first of all, Ezra, if you are there, why don't you unmute yourself and say hi to everybody for a minute? I just want to check if indeed you could make it. We were not sure about it. Ezra is a friend of many years, an amazing tour educator, like some of the tour guides and the tour guide you are meeting on your tours. And we have been at this creating special tours of different places in Israel, oftentimes with literature. Ezra, are you there?
I am here, and I'd just like to say it's a great pleasure to see you again presenting this to an unbelievable project that Ari has built over the past X number of years. And you're all in for a very good treat.
Thank you.
I know it's hard to say a good treat about Yad Vashem, but it really will give you a bit of an insight into what the place is and what it's about.
Okay, and thank you. When pandemic hit in March or April, we were very close to Yom HaShoah, the day of commemoration of the Holocaust in Israel. And this is when Ezra and I were creating this trip together. And you know what, Ezra? I reviewed the whole PowerPoint since, because the experience we have gained teaching online since we didn't have in March and April, and we do now. But I will give you credit, Ezra, for this first picture, because it gives us, and that's yours, I know it's not mine, and it gives us an aerial view of the whole campus of Yad Vashem, and it's the absolutely most perfect backdrop to the way I want to introduce my tour. Because people tell you you're gonna go on a tour of Yad Vashem, and normally you would think we are going to deal with things Holocaust. And lo and behold, we are not. This is a tour of the central, not the only, but the central place of commemorating the Holocaust in Israel. And the goal of our trip today is to look at the way the Holocaust is remembered in Israel. So collective and individual memory. This is the tour about Israeli society and how it opted to build, and you know, year after year, because Yad Vashem is never finished, it's still being developed and done from the early 50s. So our trip today is really in the footsteps of the creators of collective and somewhat individual commemoration of the Holocaust in Israel through a visit of the site of Yad Vashem. So take a look at this huge campus And immediately that you understand that it's not only a historical museum, it's way, way beyond. Can you see all the forest around? Have we been standing, as we will in a moment, at the entrance square to Yad Vashem? I will make you look all around you and see how Jerusalem surrounds Yad Vashem today, but not at the time when the place was built. Then it was in the outskirts of the city, and then Yerushalayim grew around it. And here we are at the entrance to the central place of commemoration, and you can see that there is very little shade where we are standing right now. So I will not keep you here for long, because we who guide your tours in Israel always make sure that you are standing in the shade. It's safer for you. If anybody needs to stand in the sun, it will always be the tour guide and never the audience. But I want you to have a look at these soldiers waiting for their friends to gather as they will be starting their tour. If that is the case, it's probably Sunday, because most of the groups of the military come on Sunday. If we have time at the end, I will tell you why on Sunday, but that's the day that they have educational programs for soldiers. You can see the tourists were let inside already, and I'm waiting for you to gather. And once you are all around me, I will say, Chavirim, I need you to look uphill. So you can see on the left-hand side of my slide, still the entrance to Yad Vashem, but I will direct your gaze to one side of the hill, on top of which is Mount Herzl, where Herzl is buried. And on the other slope, one slope is Yad Vashem, and the other slope, I will remind you, or maybe ask you if you have toured already, is the military cemetery. And then I will ask you to pull these three elements together. So on top of the hill, we have the man who had the vision. Herzl died in 1904, that years even before the Holocaust. He could not even probably imagine anything like it. Yet he had a sense of impending danger. Remember how he wanted the Uganda plate just to make sure we had a safe place? It was never accepted, but he had a sense of impending danger. He was not the only Zionist leader. Jabotinsky spoke about evacuation, evacuatia. So on top of the hill, the dreamer. One slope, Yad Vashem, is in commemoration of that which every Jewish leader would have loved to prevent, but couldn't. And on the other side, the other slope, with the military cemetery, we have the place where the ongoing blood price for the maintenance of the dream and its reality is paid by Israeli society. Now bring the three together, and you have a joint notion that we call Har HaZikaron, the mountain of commemoration. And now I need you to use your imagination, because Har HaZikaron, that complex of Mount Herzl and the military cemetery and Yad Vashem, are at the west end of Yerushalayim. And on its other end is yet another mountain, Temple Mount. And somehow Jerusalem, knowing, not knowing, being aware, not being aware, as you run between your supermarket and picking up your kids at kindergarten when you don't have the pandemic, you do not always remember how our life there is between that mountain of remembering our glorious past, Temple Mount, and the other mountain remembering more recent major events that shaped us at least as much as Temple Mount. I'm not judging, but these two mountains are these two poles between which lies Yerushalayim. This is the place of Yad Vashem. So even the choice of the place is already a message about us Israelis and where we place the memory of the Shoah. We're going to go through this entrance building, probably pick up our earphones so I can continue talk to you, not disturbing the others. So Ari symbolically has the earphones on for all of us, and we can go through. As we exit from the other side, we are facing an alley. Trees on both sides. At the entrance to the alley is a sign, and it says that this is the garden of the righteous, Allée des Justes, in French, Chassidei Umot Ha'olam. So I'd like you to go back with me to the time when they start planning Yad Vashem. And people, maybe like some of you thinking about the tour to Yad Vashem, were thinking, yeah, I'm going to that place to find out about the ghettos and the gas chambers and the trains and the barbed wire and the atrocities. And the planners of Yad Vashem say to you, Rega, hold your horses. Before you are ready to face evil, recognize the outstanding few righteous. Don't rush so quickly to face evil. You know it's there at the end of your road. Give respect, honor those who dared be different. Now, those of you who are in education, and that includes every parent or teacher or instructor, know how difficult it is to educate people to follow the law, to do that which we have to do by law. How much more difficult it is to create people who know how to discern when it is needed a law that needs not to be obeyed. How do you make a righteous Gentile? What does it take in education to make a person such that they will recognize the evil of a given law and will say, this one I'm not following, no matter how I was educated to follow the law. So when it comes to time to recognize the deeds of these amazing people, the state of Israel, through the makers of Yad Vashem, rather than other peoples would erect a monument or give out a medal or a scroll, nah, what do? We plant trees. This is what we know how to do, right? So we plant trees. And what type of trees? The trees planted on both sides and throughout the campus of Yad Vashem in commemoration of the righteous Gentiles are carob trees. And I even gave you a picture. And you know, if you were with me right there in that alley, or with Ezra, he would have done the same. We will stop you right there, not let you rush into the museum yet. Put you in the shade, bend and pick up from the ground, because they are always there, some carob trees. At busy seasons, you know what I do? I keep my carob in my purse, being afraid that other tour guides will pick them up when it's not season for the fruit, and I want to have one. And then we'll open them and we'll look at the carob tree. And I will ask you, as you're standing around me, I hope, not wandering all over the place, which is also fine. Why carob? Why, of all the variety of trees of the land of Israel, why not an olive tree? Why not a palm tree? Why not a pomegranate? I know you know, but let's review it. So in our tradition, there are not one, but three reasons to choose the carob for commemoration of these very unique people. So let us go one by one. So Rabbi Yochanan said about that righteous man, Choni, who was journeying on the road, and you can read just as I can read it to you. He saw an old man planting a carob tree, and he asked him, I'm talking in my own language, not the Talmud language, old man, what are you busy doing? Are you vain enough to believe that God Almighty will give you enough years to see the fruit of the tree you are planting? Like seriously? The old man responds to that and said, no way. But when I came around here to this world, there were already carob trees that I enjoyed. Somebody had planted them for me. So I therefore am not planning for myself, I'm planting for my children and grandchildren. So our first understanding of the symbol, the metaphor of the cherub in Jewish tradition, is about people who do not seek immediate gratification. People who know that they are part of a chain, that there was and there will be. And the immediate, the right now, is not the only reason to do stuff. There is a larger context. So no immediate gratification. Remember that story. Okay, there is another one, because thank God our Torah and Talmud is full of them. So there is this story about Shimon Bar Yochai, who during the time of the Roman rule on the land of Israel, and the Romans who want to create a uniform culture in all their empire that is made of so many peoples, they look at the culture of each and they forbid a few crucial things, knowing that if these things will not be adhered to and practiced, the culture will disappear. In our case, the three things that they forbid is declaring the new moon, therefore knowing your calendar and your time rhythm and your Shabbat and your holidays, etc. The second does circumcision, the thing that tells you in your body, if you're a male, who you are. And the third is the study of Torah. Rabban Shimon Bar Yochai up there in Galilee knows that this is the time not to obey the law. And he hides with his students in a cave to continue studying Torah. The story is much more elaborate than I'm going to. But it is said that God Almighty provided for them with a cherub at the entrance of the cave so they can sustain themselves. So cherub in our tradition also stands for people who know and can discern laws that need not to be obeyed. They know the time not to obey the law. And the third is a beautiful story about Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, who was such a modest person that he would sustain himself from Erev Shabbat to Erev Shabbat with a kav, a basketful of carob fruit, and that would be enough for him. So carob in this third legend stands in our memory as that which assures a minimum sustenance, that which will keep you alive if there is nothing more. Will you collect that? The people who understand that you do not always go for immediate gratification, those who know when to break the law, and those who think about the minimum sustenance. Would that be an appropriate commemoration of the righteous Gentiles? I think it would. But my students always will ask me, Rachel, do you think they know it? And I say, who cares? It's not for them. They know what to do. They did not need to be taught. They did it. We need the story. We need to be reminded of these principles. We need to know that at the darkest time, there will be people who will know and show the light. So therefore, the alley of the righteous Gentiles, ladies and gentlemen, is not for the righteous Gentiles. They knew their road. They knew the way to go. We need to be shown that road. We need to travel through the alley of the righteous Gentiles. So I will ask you now to stop listening to me and look around you at that alley. And we will stop at least by one tree, and that would be the tree of Oscar Schindler and Emily, because this is a name that everybody recognizes. And it's right there to our right as we are standing at the foot of this image. And although it's sort of garden and we are not supposed to stand there, but everybody does, so we will too. And maybe put a stone, like those of us who watch the movie and still remember how the survivors and their children go by the grave of of children. This is not his grave, it's just a memorial tree, and we'll lay a stone. So we, I think, did that ritual of not rushing first thing to meet evil, but rather at accepting the need to recognize the good way before, or as we go by Torah, uvacharta b'tov. You should choose the good, the right thing to do. So look ahead of you, and I will start sending you on your way, those of you who walk faster, and I might, like tour guides do, stay with the lingering just to make sure that you are not left behind. And we are going straight ahead as you see those two people standing there, and I'd like to meet you there. So please come and meet me there. Just continue in that way. And as we go out of the alley of the righteous Gentiles, we will find ourselves in a huge open square, and very properly, it will be called the Warsaw Square. So at the architectural heart of Yad Vashem, there is a huge square for rituals, for ceremonies, for events outdoor. And at the front or the back of it, as you wish, there is a monument. You cannot discern its details from afar. Its name is the Rappaport Monument, and this is where we are gathering. So you know what we shall do? I will ask you all to get nearer so you can see the two parts of the monument, and I will ask you to pay attention to all the details, because I'm not gonna discuss it with you while you are standing in the sunshine. It's not good for you. I'd like for you to discern all the details, take your pictures, and then please move to the left where there are benches and tables and shade, and we can sit there and discuss. So just come nearer and watch the two parts of the monument. So first of all, this is not two different monuments. It's actually one. It's the two parts of what we relate to as the Rappaport Monument. Rappaport, who created this, at the time he did it, he is not an Israeli citizen. He's a Jew, but not Israeli. The people who commissioned him to do this are neither the state of Israel nor the city of Jerusalem nor Yad Vashem. The commission comes from Warsaw. This monument is to be erected in memory of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in Warsaw, at the time when Warsaw is under communist regime. Why would the communists do a thing like that? Very simple. In the Polish law of those years, not so much today, the Warsaw Uprising is perceived as part of the Polish uprising. And it is not just about Jews and Nazis. It's about socialists against fascists. The narrative of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising fits beautifully in Poland of those years, the late 40s, beginning of the 50s. So Rappaport creates the monument for them. It's actually slightly different. I'll talk to that in a moment. And then somebody in Yad Vashem, remember, says, we should have one too. So they commission a replica. And then, like the good old Jewish way, we have a committee, and it will take some time until we decide where to place it. But finally, in the 70s, it will end where it is today, quite a few years later. Let us look at the two parts, and you can see the division between the two. On the left-hand side, you see physical, upright, strong people. There is a guy up front there. There's also a woman with her arm raised over her head. They have arms in hand, and they are looking straight up to the future, or to heavens, or to a goal. And these are the people who have decided that they will fight and will die fighting. And should somebody fall on the way, they may even step over him and continue the fight. Need I elaborate that this is in commemoration of Mordechai Anielewicz and the others who joined the physical fight and revolt in the Warsaw Ghetto in April of 1943. As for differences, that part of the monument in Warsaw is white marble. Here it's bronze. And the other thing is, in the good old tradition of realistic sculpture of the time, the woman who raises her arm over her head in the original has her breast naked, it's uncovered. No, coming to Jerusalem, it's not so much a possibility. So Rappaport had to cover her for decency. So that's one part, the strong physical uprising. On the other side, you will see the kind of art that is not really sculpture, is just on the wall. I'm not even sure that I know the proper name of art for this type of relief. Look at the details. You will see that, but for the one figure, Moses-like, with a Torah scroll in hand, he's the only one with his head up, and the child who is looking at us. So the faith of the elderly, the innocence and lack of knowledge of youth. Everybody else bowed heads. Everybody else submissive. Behind them, you can see a few bayonets. These are the soldiers who are leading them. Could you read the suggestion maybe, hey, there are only about 3 or 4 of those. Why are these people obeying? Why are they allowing themselves to be led that way? Can you hear that expression that my generation, maybe yours as well, was raised upon, that our people were led like sheep to the slaughter? These 2 parts of the monument, created by a Jew, not an Israeli, commissioned by the city of Warsaw, not that of Jerusalem, you could not, even if you tried, to find an image and an artwork that is more representative of the Israeli way of thinking about the Holocaust in the early years. This total separation between the heroes and the victims, the ones, quote unquote, 6 times, who protected our honor because they fought back, the ones who went like sheep to the slaughter. We pity them, we pray for their memory, but we are not so proud of them. We are actually critical. This is the early state of Israel. This is how 2, sometimes even 3 generations of Israelis were raised to know about the Shoah, to talk about the Shoah. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising became the epitome of the story of the Holocaust. The main square of Yad Vashem is named after the Ghetto Warsaw Uprising. While they were really a minute minority. And we will have still to go a long way until we learn to talk about different forms of uprising and revolt. Saving one person is a revolt. Hiding and remaining alive is a revolt. Teaching a lesson in a ghetto is a revolt. Holding a concert, continuing to live one more day, sharing a slice of bread with somebody in Auschwitz. All these are forms of revolt. Israel needed many, many years to develop from this story to the one I hope we are at nowadays. Why do I say I hope? Because as I invite you to look at the wall of which these are 2 parts, have a look at its left-hand side where you have an empty wall. And this is the Rachel Korazim hope expressed every single time that I stand with the group there. I will say that Rappaport knew best, long dead, when he created the 2 parts and left one wall empty. For the day that we will be mature enough not to have to divide, when we will know how to create an artistic symbol for our whole loss. Just like I think when the Second Temple came down, there must have been warriors and there must have been just survivors and victims. And yet, as we talk about them today, we do not tell them apart. We talk about the Khurban together. We are, I hope, on the way to learn a new vocabulary in Israel to talk about our loss without the need to say who was more heroic than the other. At this point in our tour, in reality, I will let you have a lot of time for conversation and for talk. But with the framework that Ari gave me, this tour takes 3 hours and Ari gave me 1. So we need to continue. And let us go. We are just going straight ahead by the left-hand side of the monument. And I want you to see where we are. We are at number 25, and we are on our way to number 24. So you know that you have to go down to that alley and then further down 1 step and then continue towards 24, which is where the boxcar is. So I know many of you will be lingering because some of you will agree with what I have just said, and many will think that we do need to put the heroes on a pedestal, and some will say, no, but my mom, you know, the way she was talked upon and about when she came as a sheep to the slaughter, that was always an insult, etc. I know they are all there in class right now, all these opinions, and yet will you please continue and meet me by the boxcar. So we are getting near it, and it is sort of on rails that were a bridge, but it's broken. And the boxcar is just placed at the very tip of the rails as if ready to fall into an abyss. Or maybe, as a group of kids once told me, no, Rachel, it's not falling into an abyss, it's going straight up to heaven. Whichever way. Have another look. Here it is from closer by, with all those beautiful trees around it. But as it is placed, as you could see that on the map, I would like you to have all these different views of the boxcar with the Jerusalem Hill. And if we were standing there, I could even show you Hadassah Medical Center. And I think it's part of it to be able to see that lowest moment in our history with the backdrop of the Hadassah and Karam Hospital, which is the highest level of caring for human life that we can reach. And while we're standing there, there is, you know, this cement wall, and I will ask you to gather with me, around me, by this glass partition, because on both sides of the cement wall, one hand going left to right will be the English text, and the other going right to left will be the text in Hebrew of a short yet very famous poem by Dan Pagis, survivor himself. It is called Written in Pencil in the Sealed Car. I'd like for you to listen to the Ivrit, and then we will go to the English. כתוב בעיפרון בקרון החתום. כאן במשלוח הזה אני חווה עם הבל בני, אם תראו את בני הגדול קין בן אדם, תגידו לו שאני. Written in pencil in the sealed car by Dan Pagis. Here in this convoy, I, Eve, with my son Abel, if you see my big son, Cain, son of Adam, tell him that I, and in some translation, the M is added. Only in some translation because the Hebrew doesn't have the verb to be, and the I alone in the Hebrew is what Dan Pagis had written. I have been known to take half an hour to teach this poem, which I obviously am not going to do today. So I'd like you to pay attention to the following. First of all, I don't think that anybody in those boxcars on the way to death would have really bothered to leave a message written on the wall of the boxcar with a pencil. I don't even think that a pencil would show on the wooden wall of the boxcar. I think it's a fiction, just like the voice itself, because it's built on the Cain and Abel story. And in the biblical Torah story, nobody tells us that Eve or Adam had chosen sides between their two sons. But Dan Pagis says, I don't know about that Torah story. I know about my story. And in my story, Eve would have chosen, and she would be in the boxcar with her son, sending a message to the other one who is outside. So Eve is talking to us from the convoy with my son Abel, and that's fine if you read English, but if you read the Hebrew, it's Hevel, which is the original Hebrew name of Abel, but also Hevel Peh, the breath of your mouth in the cold weather when you can see it. So in the Hebrew, there is two images actually, the biblical one, but also the mother who in the darkness and the so many people are not being able to see is hanging on just to listen if her son is still breathing, i.e. with the breathing of my son. When that is established, it turns to us, those outside of the boxcar. If you see my big son, so she does take responsibility for the other one, for the Cains, for the murderers. The Nazis, unlike some writers have called them the Nazi beast. No, says Dan Pagis. That's an insult to animals. No animal does that. Animals kill for livelihood, not for ideologies. The tragedy of the Nazis is that they were human. And it is possible for humans to become Nazis. That's the tragedy. So if you see my big son, Cain, son of Adam, again, the Hebrew, Cain ben Adam carries an additional meaning, because ben Adam in Hebrew is not only son of Adam, it's also mensch, human being. Is there irony? Maybe even cynicism? Tell him that no full stop, poem interrupted. Did the train reach its destination and she couldn't continue? Are there not words for the message? If you were my students, sometimes I would have paper and pencil and will ask you to write down what you think the message should be. But as we are standing in front of the boxcar, we want also to remember that commemoration is not only monuments and museums and amazing gardens, but also beautiful work of art that you can occasionally find me teaching, literature related to the memory of the Holocaust. I know that you need a deep breath after that, and I'm going to give it to you because I want for us to take leave of the boxcar, the twin of which is in the Washington, D.C. Holocaust Museum, presented there in a totally different way. And here is the map again. And you remember that we are at 24. And I'd like you to find on the map 21 is very nearby. We can go around, but you know, I am an Israeli, so I may ask you to just cross across the hill. It will depend. I hope the ladies are not in high heels and you can do that. And let us look at a very interesting monument. Here it is now in front of you. And this is a memorial for the soldiers and the partisans, Jewish ones, who fought in the various Allied armies against the Nazis. And remember that we are not into Holocaust stories or fighting stories. We are into Israeli society. And look at what Israel is doing in this particular work of art. You have 6, which is always the 6 million. They look like sarcophagus, but they are placed in such a way that among them, they create the shape of a blue Magen David made out of thin air and sky. And that is crossed as if by a sword. So I'd like you to look at the center of this monument, the Magen David sort of crossed through by a sword. And I'd like you to look at this picture on the right-hand side of my slide. And you can see that it's actually the basis of the emblem of the I.D.F. So what Israel is saying, you were the I.D.F. before we ever had an I.D.F. You were us. We were you. We are you. Okay. And this is a monument that is sort of far at the back of Yad Vashem, and we rarely go there. So Ari, when next you come, we're doing that tour and going to all these outdoors monuments and not rushing into the museum. Okay? Promise? So we can continue. And as we continue, we will probably recite some of the names, because we always speak about the Mordechai Anileviches and the Hans Senesh, and we ought to. But did we ever mention Paulina Gelman, who was a combat pilot in the Red Army and flew 900 missions against Nazi forces? And you know why we never commemorated her in Israel, because she never made Aliyah. And you know why you never mentioned her in America, because she was probably a communist. What else would she be? No, between communist and not making Aliyah, she doesn't belong into our story. Or is it time to think again? Is it time to start listening to those additional stories? And remember that our commemoration of the Holocaust was oftentimes shaped according to a given ideology. And now that we are mature, it's time to look at that ideology, look at what it had shaped, and try and think of different options. We can look at an amazing work of art that is a reproduction of a sculpture that is in Buchenwald, one of the sites of the Nazi concentration camps. And I think what it says to us is that human bodies were actually tortured to the shape of barbed wire. The barbed wire and the humans become one. And as we take with us this silent, non-verbal, graphic message, we, come on, after all, are people of the book. And is it possible at all for us to entertain a commemoration of the Holocaust without at least one verse for our sacred books? So as we are approaching what we call the Tent of Commemoration, and maybe we'll have a minute to go inside, I'd like you to stand with your back to that wall, cement on top, stones below, and turn to the other side where I'm standing. And you will see another wall, which oddly enough maybe looks a little bit, the stone structure, like the wall, okay, the kotel. And on it, in cement, letters from the book of Isaiah, 56, I think. And I'm quoting the verse to you. It's not a whole verse, it's chopped up. And in Hebrew, of course, and then we will discuss it in English. But first, I need for you to think as those people who are building Yad Vashem have to choose a verse. And you are going to imagine being who we are. Oy, the debate and the arguments and the rabbis and the mavens and the scholars. And when I had an opportunity to visit this place was a person who did his Ph.D. not over the Holocaust, but Yad Vashem, he told me, Rachel, don't be a cynic. There was never an argument. They all wanted just this one verse. So if that in itself is not a miracle, you'll have to agree and let us study. ונתתי להם בביתי ובחומותיי יד ושם ... אשר לא יכרת. And I shall give them within my house and in my walls a memorial and the name ... that shall not be cut off. When a prophet like Isaiah starts a sentence with the word, and I shall give them, you know that it's not, the I is not the prophet. The prophet echoes the divine voice that he hears. And therefore the promise here is not promised by a human being, albeit a prophet, by an echoing of a divine promise. And I shall give them within my house and in my walls. The promise is that the commemoration will be within our house and walls. The Holocaust did not happen here. It happened far away. Yet when we build our national home, just like the tradition says to leave a place unfinished in memory of that other building, just like when we build a new family, we break a glass in memory of that very same other building. When we build a national home, we shall leave a corner to remember that destruction. Within my house and in my walls. We do it not only in Israel. You guys do the same in your own communities. I shall give them a monument and the name. Yad in this case doesn't mean just hand, it means monument. So the commitment is not only to build a memorial, but to remember the names. What a choice of a verse. Indeed, behind that wall used to be the center where they started collecting the names. Now it's all digital, but at the time it was folders and folders and folders. So there is a recognition among the people who build the Yad Vashem that's not enough to have a monument, that we are committed to remember the name because there are so many of them who do not have even people to say Kaddish for them. That shall never be cut off. The notion of karet, of being cut off, is a very severe one in Judaism. Death is not being cut off. As long as people say a prayer in your memory, as long as you remember, you're not cut off the community, not cut off the family. Who is the prophet talking to? There's going to be an awkward moment here, but I want you to follow me. Isaiah is talking to a group of men, eunuchs, whose ability to create life was taken away from them by torture or illness. And he's talking to them and promises them, you will have your name remembered. The ... says, Tov mi banim u'mi better than sons and daughters. And some of you may think now, did you really have to bring that up? And I say, yes, I do. Because here is another notion that we need to attain. What we lost in the Holocaust, excuse my expression, is not only the 6 million. It's the lost potential. Because in every single gathering that we would be at, statistically about a third of the Jewish people was annihilated and murdered in the Holocaust. Between every two of us, there should be a third person, and they are not here. They could even be in this virtual room, but they are not here. But the fact that we are doing this is exactly the commemoration that was intended by the choice of this verse. Having studied it, we can now turn back and go, here's the verse as we have studied it, the full verse without the ... And Ari, you really can have me send you the PowerPoint, but you are welcome to take pictures, but you know that I will send it to you, it's not an issue. We will go into the Tent of Commemoration. And we know it is not a tent, and yet we call it that. Maybe the shape, maybe the fact that tent goes back to a commemoration at a time in our history when we were countryless, wandering in the desert, having a tent instead of a temple. Is there a Zionist message there? And we stand on a platform, looking at the eternally burning fire, and the names of Belzec and Chelmno and Auschwitz and Treblinka, etc., are between us and the fire, you ask yourself, how were these camps chosen? Why not? I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds of them. And I think two things with which I would like to conclude our tour. The names mentioned here are the names that were known at the time when this is built. This is the first building built at Yad Vashem. So in an odd way, it is a commemoration for a stage in our commemoration. And just like we know today that there were thousands of Nazi camps, really, we will never know all of them. And we cannot even attempt to. Maybe it's a good thing, you know, just like at the beginning of the Passover Seder, that we are supposed to read the whole book from beginning to end. And I know that you guys do all of it, especially the part after the meal, and that you do it twice. But it's only in my family, maybe, that after the meal, people would like to rush things a little bit. And the rabbis who created the Haggadah must have known my family. Because at the very beginning of the Passover Haggadah, there is that page that says, Kol shelo amar shlosha ele bepesach lo yatsa yedei chova. Whoever didn't say the three following didn't do the bare minimum. And then they tell us what to do. Because those who wrote the Haggadah knew that there will be times that we will not be able to do everything. And that there are among us people who are not planning to become Holocaust scholars, and it's fine. Can you at least come into the Ohel Yizkor and stand there for a few minutes and read aloud Auschwitz, Treblinka, Chelm, Belzec, Theresienstadt? And if that has to be enough, let it be enough. So I think our whole tour can be looked at like that. We can continue walking into the Children's Memorial and walk inside it and look at those 6 candles that through the work of mirrors stand for the 1,600,000 children between babies and 18 who were murdered in the Holocaust. We can come and stand in front of the Korczak Memorial, who joined his charges, the children in the orphanage that he ran, and went with them to Treblinka, and think about all the teachers and the pedagogues who went with their charges. We can go down to the valley of the communities and look at the different names, because it is not enough, excuse the expression, to remember the 6 million, because on top of the individual loss, we lost those thousands of communities that are creatures of their own. So as we are ready to leave, the State of Israel charges you as you leave Yad Vashem with another mission. You are to go out and climb these stairs all the way to Mount Herzl and go in this alley of commemoration from the end of World War II until the creation of the State of Israel. But that tour you will have to do with some other tour guide, not with me and not today. Thank you very much for being part of this. And I think that I will want to stop my screen share and meet all of you, Chevre. And Ari, you will tell me what questions do I need to address.
I will. So thank you. I know when we were there in
Let me get a
2000.
sip of drink.
Sure. When we were in there in 2014 and 2017, we have many options, and people who have never been to Yad Vashem went to Yad Vashem. They were very disappointed, I think, on the last trip. So hopefully those of you who went on the last trip, this makes up for it. So I have a few questions. Let me start with the following. The tour you just took us on, is that the tour that people are now getting, a new understanding, a new reading of Yad Vashem vis-a-vis Israel? And is that what Israelis are getting? Or is this a unique tour that only a few people get if they go with you and a few other people?
This is a tour that Ezra will tell you about. I give to tour guides. This is not the kind of tour that your regular tourist group will take. I can tell you about unique occasions and groups that I led through this trip, who were not tour guides or educators. It's mainly for that, because through this tour, when it's 3 hours and not 1 hour, at each point, I will also raise educational questions that we can take out of this. As I said, tour guides, I can tell you of a unique occasion that I did this tour for my family and friends, 26 people, 16 of whom were survivors. We went with wheelchairs and folding chairs, and it took 5 hours. I can tell you one of the unique things in my case, because there are tour guides in many languages, but not so many in Hungarian. If there is a group of Hungarians and I'm asked, I will take them. But it's rare that I do it. I'm also aging, Ari. This is a very tiring tour even to do when I sit in my study, but the 3 or 4 hours that it takes outdoors, it's very tiring. So I don't do it very often. It is a unique tour for me.
Is the content, though, particularly the beginning where you talk about kind of a changing vision of the Holocaust vis-a-vis Israel, is that being taught by the other educators who are giving tours to their groups,
yeah,
and specific to Israeli groups?
You know, ask Oriel Feinerman. You know, he would be one of the, Oriel was with me on this tour when we just started shaping it, I'm going to say 20 years ago. Okay. He is one of the chevre. I don't know how many times and with how many groups I did it with Ezra. He maybe remembers better, being younger than me. But yes, they are bringing these messages. The good tour educators, they will know how to do this. And there are teachers who are getting now some of this. And I hope that Holocaust education is slowly, it doesn't need to be changed, you know, uprooted, but a little bit more nuance, a little bit more complex stories beyond, you know, like Mishu'al et Kuma, from destruction to revival, but a little bit more in between. Yeah.
So if you have limited time, and it's you know, your first trip to Israel, or you've been there, but you have limited time, why should you include either a visit, or why should you come back for another visit to Yad Vashem in your limited itinerary?
If you have a limited itinerary, I would say if you didn't do the campus of Yad Vashem, and if you are interested in the complicated relationship between Israeli society and the Holocaust, then this is a good choice. If you focused all your Holocaust studies really on the atrocities and the stories of what happened over there, you will want, when you visit your own memorials in America, when you come to Israel, you will want to go a step beyond and step out of the story and look at what is it that you were telling or being told, and be a little bit more, again, critical, nuanced, complex in your attitude. And then again, there are so many other options that even I can speak for. So I will not tell you, you will choose.
Should this be the first stop for visiting dignitaries who come to Israel? And if so, why?
Dignitaries?
Or why not? You know, when people come to Israel, isn't this the first stop where they take?
I hate it when we shove the Shoah down everybody's throat. No, this should be a more advanced. No, I don't think so. There's so much more to Israel that needs to be addressed these days. And not everything Israeli should be looked at through the lens of the Holocaust. Yet it is, at the same time, it's a crucial point of view to understand what makes us tick. And within Israel, with the many divides, etc., also, it's a bit of a conversation of how we address the Shoah.
What's missing?
Like, do it when you come to Israel. If you don't come in August, probably.
Right. No, we come in
hate
October. We come in October after the Chagim, after the holidays. So what's missing from Yad Vashem? What if they said,
What's the next?
Rachel, you can add something that's been missing or change something.
Totally.
What would you do?
And since this is not the first time I've been asked this question, I will say two phases. One, I hope to see in my lifetime. The other will not come in my lifetime, but one day. When you walk the Museum of Yad Vashem, and even the campus, as I have described it to you, but in the museum, you reach that end bit with the window opening on the Jerusalem hills, and I see some of you nodding, and you know what I'm talking about. And the story is we suffered, excuse the cynicism, and then we came out, and wow, Yerushalayim, Eretz Israel, and everybody came to the land of Israel. Excusez-moi, what about your parents? Not everybody came to the land of Israel. That was not the only takeaway from the Shoah, that you need to build a Jewish state. There were other conclusions, other choices, other decisions. They created your communities. And that is not told in Yad Vashem. What about the people, my friends in Hungary, who stayed in Hungary and remain Jewish and alive and revive Jewish education now? My friends from the Lauder Yavne School, etc., who are also children of survivors, just like myself. Those other alternatives to the one and only Zionist response have no place at Yad Vashem. This I still hope to see. When does Israel reach the point where it can put the Holocaust in context of other genocide? That will take 2 more generations. I will not see that. And I don't see myself working for that. But for the other, not necessarily Zionist responses to the Holocaust, yes, I'd like to see that. If we indeed want to make it a Jewish people commemoration of the Shoah, then your communities and what your parents have contributed to Jewish communities in North America and elsewhere belong there. And they are not there.
Thank you. Let's end with, first of all, I wanted to thank you for this tour. I wish I had this tour when I went to Yad Vashem years and years ago. So we'll be offering it when we come to Israel, hopefully in the fall. I will warn people though that this is, when we're in Jerusalem in the morning, you have three to four options, then there's lunch and 3 to 4 options. So you're gonna have to choose. This is one of the tours you can go on. But I wanted to thank Rachel as well for just being online and online presence, teaching Israeli literature and poets. It's amazing the success that Rachel's had. There's an article that's been written about Rachel, at least one that I've seen. But I also want to mention this project that Rachel started. Rachel is the one who connected CSP to Asaf, Rabbi, and to Israeli artists and musicians who are really having
we discovered Asaf Rabbi and brought him to you.
Right. So
our beloved Asaf.
So, many people in Israel and the United States are having a hard time because of COVID, but artists in specific have no jobs when there's COVID. They can't, there's no
And you were
concerts.
one of the first to recognize the need to support this.
Well, but you introduced us to Asaf, and Asaf we created holiday messages through musicians that many of you who are donors received before Rosh Hashanah. But we are raising funds. This whole CSP 16 program, Visit to Israel, is free of charge. And we ask people, if you want, please make a donation of $36 to CSP. We're using all that money. We have a challenge grant from Phyllis Gilmore, who has contributed $1,500 in memory of her husband, Barney Gilmore. So we're commemorating Barney's, we're dedicating this in memory of Barney. We're gonna have a concert November 15th, 10 a.m. Pacific time with 3 or 4 of the Israeli musicians. And we're inviting everybody to attend, and if you can support it, that's terrific. We have the challenge grant out, but I do want to thank Rachel as being the originator of the idea and connecting us to amazing musicians that not only will we enjoy November 15th, but Rachel features them at the beginning of many, if not all, of her classes, so you can see a musician each time you join Rachel's poetry class. And we hope that when we go to Israel from now on, when we have meals and we do programs, we'll have at least many of these musicians be with us to entertain, but teach us about their music. So I wanted to end with thank you. How do you donate? You can go to www.occsp.net. That's our website, and there's a donation button. And if you donate $36, I will know what it's for. If you donate today, I will know what it's for, and I will keep track, and everybody will get a thank you. And those who donate may get invited to our concert about half an hour early or so to meet with the musicians, say hello, and hear some private stuff. Details, yes, there are details about the concert will be coming up this week. Asaf has been out. Unfortunately, his grandmother passed away, but he is very efficient, and I'm sure he will get us the details this week.
Yeah.
I will share with you November 15th.
I spoke to
10
him
a.m.
this
Pacific.
morning. He's doing fine.
So with that, Rachel, do you want to do a promo? What are you teaching on Tuesday at 11 a.m. and then we'll go?
Starting immediately after the high holidays, we started 2 series. Tuesdays, the great Hebrew poets, or if you want, the Club of the Dead Hebrew poets. And we started with Bialik, and we are going on to Chernichovsky this week, Tuesdays. 2 sessions for each one of the great poets, going all the way into May. And lots of beautiful, famous names, Rachel, Leah Goldberg, Yehuda Amichai, etc., all not with us anymore. And we balance that on Thursdays with contemporary Israeli poets. So we did Agi Mishol, who, like myself, is a daughter of survivors. And this week on Thursday, we start with Erez Biton, one of the central Mizrahi voices, Moroccan voices in modern contemporary Israeli poetry. And of course, in every class, we have musicians. And this particular Thursday, those of us who are on my email list know it already. We have a special guest who grew up with the poet and will share some of his memories. And much more, get on my email list and you will find out. Thank you very much, Chevra. It was wonderful walking Yad Vashem with you.
Thank you. I will add that CSP is going to be sponsoring 2 programs in the spring about poet Elias Cohen. If you're with us in 2017, we visited in the West Bank with Elias. He is a settler, poet, pacifist, or I would say
social worker.
Social
also.
worker.
And my email, korazim@gmail.com, just like the name on my screen, Korazim, just the last name, Korazim @gmail.com. Ari wrote it in the chat, I think, more than once during the session.
Right. You're all invited back later today in about an hour and 15 minutes, where we go to Christian Jerusalem to explore that part of the old city. Most of you, I assume, when you go to Israel, spend your time in the Jewish quarter and not so much in the Christian quarter. We're going to go for a walk in the Christian quarter with our guide Uri Feinberg and Hannah Benkowski. We're going to go into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and we're going to learn a lot more about things you probably don't know. So Rachel, Korazim, thank you.
Have a wonderful rest of the day. Class, I'm waiting for you on Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Class dismissed. See you soon. See you in about an hour and 15 minutes, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Ari, will you send me the link for the recording once you have it?
Of course.